Good day YouTube. Today I'm going to go through my crit Stam Sorc build in full detail, going through all the gear set, the rotations, as well as the champion point system. Gotten some comments in my previous videos that they would really like to know the nitty-gritty of this build, so I think I'll just go through it one more time, this time with some of the latest updates in tech. I also go through some of the rotation of the skills as well as some gameplay footages right there, so just make sure you stay all the way. Okay, without further ado, let's go in. For my 5-piece gear set, it will be Orders Wrath. This is the main bread and butter of getting my crit damage and critical chance inflated. So the idea for this build is actually very offensive natured. It is to go in guerrilla style, sneak in, attack with the full burst that you can possibly bring to the table, and then after that try not to engage in a lengthy 1vx battle, just sneak away. In fact, you can actually say that I'm a Stam Sorc who is trying to play like a Nightblade. Right, just go in from the back, give a kill, and then after that on the fly, and then after that retreat into the shadows once more. So the 5-piece is Orders Wrath. The monster set is Belloc, which is very good at giving you that burst required, especially when you build your ultimate up to 500. That will give you 500 spell damage as well as 500 times 23 spell penetration. The 3-piece set that I will be using is actually the agility set. So this one basically just enhance the stamina as well as add on to the weapon and spell damage. Right, 1 piece would be trainee. This is standard, this is staple, so go for this. And then of course the mythic that I use is the Oaken Soul Ring, and I want to answer this once and for all that I do not do double bar because of the lag. I do not have time to swap bars. It doesn't work when you have a latency of more than 300. So Oaken Soul is the way to go. With 1 bar, it is also a lot more fun to just focus on a few skills and rotating them without having to go back to the back bar, trigger your Boundless Storm, your crit surge and all that, and then after that kite around, right? That's just not my thing. Okay, so very quickly I'll go through the armor one by one. For the heavy chest itself, I feel that it is always more effective and economical to have it reinforced. So in order not to be squishy, which sorcerers tend to be, reinforced heavy chest gives you the bang for your buck. It really increases your resistance by quite a fair bit. And then you go down to the sash. All right, the shoes, I have 2 light, 3 medium and 2 heavy. So these are the greaves, medium braces, and then after that, oh sorry, I make a correction, I actually switch it to 3 light, 2 medium and 2 heavy. All right, okay, so basically I think you can slow down and just have a look at the details of each of the particular gear set if you want to. I use multi-effect enchantment for most of them, and for the remaining pieces, basically I just try to max out my stamina because that is my bread and butter since I'm a Stam Sorc. If I'm a Mage Sorc, it would be the other way around. Okay, so okay, now let's go to weapons, right? So weapons, I use a double axe, so dual wield give me a lot of very interesting passives. With the dual wield slotted, I actually get a very good looking spell damage. If I switch to lightning staff, this will drop to about 5,800, so I lost about 400 worth of spell damage, which in my opinion, in my experience, matters quite a fair bit in the battles. One of the axe will be sharpened and the other one will be nunhoned, so there's a balance between increasing damage as well as penetration. I don't think the poison really matters that much, so I just use the crown lethal poison that the game just provide. You can go for other sorts of poison that help you break free of CC, or you can just stick to enchantments as well. I think that is fine. My enchantment for both my weapons, should I use them, is the Absorb Stamina enchantment that just gives me back a little bit more stamina resource and deal some physical damage at the same time. Okay, now without further ado, I think we can go on to maybe take a look at the Stone, right? So I went for the Lover, which is spell and physical penetration. Let me explain a little bit about this. Previously, I went for the Shadow, which is to increase, I think, 10% of your critical and healing damage, which worked for quite a fair bit up till this current crit. I think a lot of people are running Rallying Cry, Ratchet Vitality, because this has been heavily advertised by some of the more influential ESO content creators. So Rallying Cry would actually give you a huge critical resistance once it procs, and I think that is the reason why my crit damage is no longer as effective as of this current patch compared to the previous few patches. So if I were to swap out the critical buff, damage buff, and I focus more on my physical and spell penetration, I think I would do more damage on the aggregate, on the average, because the physical and spell pen is a constant lowering of your enemy's resistance throughout the entire battle, if that makes sense, with or without my crit taking off and irregardless of my opponent's critical resistance. This increase in spell and physical damage will constantly be there in all my light attacks, in all my stamina spams and my magical spams. And to add further that, right, if we were to go back to my gear set and look, most of my gear set are divine. Okay, so I have divine in all except for 2 which are reinforced. And so with a 9.1% increment, basically I would reach pretty mouth-watering spell penetration of close to 10k, and this is not counting when I will proc my Belllock, which I always will. I will try to get my Belllock to at least more than 400 plus ultimate before I launch it. And so we are talking about close to 20k worth of penetration in the battle. I think that is immensely useful on a consistent basis. So that's the reason why I decide to switch up my Mandas. Some of the other stats come with Oaken Solar, so this is the usual stuff. Okay, one more thing I'd like to talk about is Vampire Stage 3. I think this is sort of bread and butter for any PvP player. Just go and get it, no questions asked. This is very useful in mitigating your damage once your health is lowered to, I believe, less than 30%. You probably get damage mitigation of up to 30%, right? So this is very useful. Okay, so on to stuff like CP, okay, Backstabber, because I'm basically essentially still a crit oriented kind of Stam Sorc build, so I think this is a no-brainer for me. Ironclad, this is just for damage mitigation. I used to switch this up occasionally with which one is it? Let me look for it. Yeah, this Wrathful Strikes, which adds another 205 spell damage. So I think this is something you can consider swapping ever once in a while. If you're solo and you bump into a group, I think Ironclad will definitely be more useful. If you have a partner and you're in a ball group and your defense is kind of taken care of, more importantly, someone is providing you maybe major protection or something like that, then you can compromise Ironclad and then go for Wrathful Strikes, which just makes your attacks a little bit more potent. This 205 increment in weapon and spell damage will not show in your stats, but you'll just show every time you do damage, your damage will be higher, right? Okay, Master at Arms increases damage done, direct damage by altogether 6% for me. Fighting Finesse, again, going back to anything that's critical damage or critical healing oriented, that will be good for my build. On to the red stuff, right? Sustained by Suffering. This is very necessary because in my build, the weakest link is actually the resource recovery. So this is very necessary for me to survive in either Cyrodiil or Imperial City. Battlegrounds is another thing altogether. Just try to stay with your group if you can, right? In BG. Celerity, movement speed is king in PvP, no matter how you look at it. Just get that 10% movement speed, no questions asked, right? There's a reason why a lot of people recommend this as your staple. So Survival Instincts, again, this is on the resource recovery side, just to make sure that the cost of all your skills just lowered by 25%, which is a lot. Pain's Refuge is another form of damage mitigation, always necessary, especially when many people start to gang up on you. This will allow you to get away. Okay, so let's go back to the very last part on the skill rotation and some basic strategies. This is a 1 bar, so it's actually very straightforward. I would always be in hiding and sneak so that I get my spell damage increment as a vampire when I go out of sneak for about 6 seconds. So within that 6 seconds, what I want to do is to cast my curse, because that will go off in 3 seconds and that will explode when I have that spell damage buff from my vampire skill line. After I cast the Haunting Curse, my opponent may or may not be aware that I'm around, because the Haunting Curse is kind of like passive, right? Unless you hear the sound. I would employ Streak to stun my opponent. Once my opponent is stunned, my Dual Wield passive kicks in. Any stunned opponent that is CC'd, you do like a 15% more in your damage inflicted on him. So during that time, launch the Dawnbreaker. If you miss him with the streak, which you normally wouldn't, the Dawnbreaker will also have a stun effect on your opponent. This is a huge damage from the Dawnbreaker itself, right? 18k physical damage, and there's also a DOT involved. So while the Dawnbreaker goes off, hopefully that's around the 3rd second, your Haunting Curse will go off as well. If any of these guys crit, or if all 3 of them crit, you are looking at a lot of damage dealt onto your opponent. He would, if he has survived this initial onslaught, be kind of on the back pedal, and he'll be busy trying to get his shields up, trying to get his healing done. He will not have time to inflict any form of damage onto you. This is when you start to spam. All the skills thus far have been magical based, so it's time for you to employ your stamina spammable, which is Silver Shards. Silver Shards deal a very impressive amount of damage, and it has very little global cooldown time, which is why it is a very important staple spammable. Slotting this fighter skill in also increases your spell damage by 3%, which is a lot. The major skills that are slotted in increase by 2% each, which is why I have a mage skill of each particular line, so I get all the passives that I can possibly get from my class. And then the fighter skill, I have 2 of them, so that is a 6% increase in my damage, which is a reason why my damage is like 6,000, which is relatively on the high side. Okay, and then after spamming the Silver Shards, anytime your Crystal Frag procs, you employ that. And alternatively, when your stamina is below 50%, I always make it a muscle memory to start to spam Crystal Frag instead, so that my stamina can recharge. And let me explain this. As a seasoned PvPer, you would know that when you are low on Magicka, it is not as bad as compared to if you're low on stamina. When you're low on stamina, you cannot break free, you cannot roll dodge, game over is just around the corner. Whereas if you're low on your Magicka, you just cannot streak away. It's not that bad, it's not the end of the world. So always keep an eye out and be mindful of your stamina resource. Don't try not to let it ever go below 30%. If you can, switch to your Magicka spammable, and then keep your distance with your enemy, which is very crucial for this particular build. The closer you are to your enemy, especially to the more sweaty classes like the Dragon Knight or the Imbecile classes that start to use two-handed sword and is hacking away at you like a mindless barbarian, they do a lot of damage up close. You want to keep your distance and not let their light attacks land on you. This is why my spammables are all distanced. And then on top of that, the Twilight Matriarch will be doing its thing like 1k pathetic damage, better than nothing. And the more important thing is using the Twilight Matriarch to heal would give me 16k worth of heals at one go, which is a lot. It's more than Hardened Ward, it's more than Vigor. Although the other two have the benefit of a heal over time, which is useful in many situations, I concur. But the Twilight Matriarch allows you 16k one shot, and then you should follow up immediately after the heal with a roll dodge, so that the next couple of attacks will miss you and your health will be almost back to full, and you can start your rotations again. Right, so the Twilight Matriarch also allows for a increment, the passive increment of 10% of your health resource, which allows my health pool basically to be close to 31k, which is very useful towards just not being a glass cannon at the end of the day, to not be squishy. Especially when you have a lot of latency flying around like me, right? You do need a lot of buffs in your health, your armor resistance, just to make sure you don't get one shot and you actually have a chance to survive and win the battle. So I think basically I've covered most of my rotations. As the fight goes on, you lose more and more advantage of this particular build. So bear that in mind. This is a guerrilla, one-off, wham bam, thank you ma'am kind of build. The longer it goes, the less your resource will recover. And also the latency just gets worse and worse. I don't know why. There's something wrong with Zor's server. So try to have an escape plan if the battle drags on. And the good thing is once your Dawnbreaker recharges, just use it immediately. The first time round, you should try to charge it to at least 400 plus. 500 is preferable, so you have your maximum damage output. And once you have used it, it lasts for, I think the bell lock lasts for a couple of seconds. I can't really remember, like maybe 6 to 12 seconds or so. And once it's up, right, yeah, keep your distance, and when your bell lock is ready again, the Dawnbreaker ultimate is actually relatively low at 116. Use it immediately once it's up, because chances are your enemy is also fighting for his dear life to survive your initial onslaught. So do not be concerned about building up your ultimate when the battle is ongoing. Okay, I think that's all there is to it. I think I'll just leave you with some gameplay footages. If you're familiar with my channel, you would know how I roll. It is quite repetitive. I always have the same combo and the same attack style on my opponents, right? So I hope you enjoyed this video. Drop a like and subscribe. Or if you don't, then there's a special place for you. Just kidding. Thank you for your time. Stay around. I see you in Tamriel. Goodbye, everybody.